In this tutorial, we're going to look at direct from disk streaming in bitKlavier, and this was really motivated by the bitKlavier Grand, which is this expansive sample library that we made in the past year that is really quite wonderful and really expands the palette for the kinds of piano sounds that we have accessible in bitKlavier now. bitKlavier can't work with commercial libraries because we really need to get at the samples directly and be able to load them and manipulate them ourselves. And so we've been limited a little bit, and the bitKlavier Grand helps us address that. You can read more about it here. This is on the Get website at the bitKlavier site, and you can learn about how to get it and all the different mic images that we have. So you can see a photo here of all the different mic images and so on that we use. There are 9 different stereo mic images, and they really give you quite distinctive colors and flavors that might be useful in particular performance and recording situations. bitKlavier, the bitKlavier Grand, the smallest versions, so 44K, 16-bit, are available for direct download. They're not too large. For the higher resolution ones that are 24-bit and the higher sample rates, these are quite large. They get up to close to 10 gigabytes. And so we've had to find a different solution for hosting those. And we're using Princeton University's data space for that. And they have a whole set of instructions for how to do this. I've made another video for showing you how to go about downloading this, setting up Globus for installing and so on. So check that out and go ahead and download some of those mic images. They would be useful for exploring direct from disk streaming in bitKlavier. I do want to mention one thing that was left out of this last video that's come up since then. When you click on one of the images, the links for Globus for one of the images, sometimes, for whatever reason, it looks like there's nothing there. And that's really annoying. And that's just because the panel settings here are set so they only show one endpoint for where this transfer might happen. If you click here, you'll see, at the research data repository, the bitKlavier Grand is there, and then your collection is here. And so you'd search for your collection, and then you could go ahead and make a choice here and start downloading so that you can start using it. So again, you just need to select the split panel so that you see both. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to assume that you've downloaded at least some of these, and you've put them somewhere. Now, to do direct from disk streaming and to have it really work, you really need an SSD drive, a solid state drive, and it needs to either be a built-in drive or a Thunderbolt drive. USB 3 might work, but you're likely to get some glitchiness with it because it's just not quite fast enough. So I use it with a Thunderbolt SSD drive, and I've also used it with a built-in SSD drive on a laptop, for instance. And so if that's not accessible to you, direct from disk streaming might not be a practical option for you at this point. So I'm going to assume you've downloaded some of those and you've got them on an SSD drive somewhere. And now in bitKlavier, we're going to take a little tour of the preferences window here. And this is where you can set paths for various types of samples for bitKlavier. And you'll notice you can actually, if you want now, move where the built-in samples are. So normally bitKlavier will install the samples in the applications folder with bitKlavier. But let's say you want to put it on an external drive because you're trying to save space. You can just move that folder, that samples folder, and then tell bitKlavier by setting the search path here. And so it will know where to find it. Oh, I just messed that up. How about that? So I'm going to choose samples. There we go. Similarly, if you want to move the sound fonts directory and don't want to have it in your bitKlavier directory, you can do that. I'm keeping it in my bitKlavier directory for now. And then if you want to have other samples other than the built-in ones, for instance, like the bitKlavier Grand, and you've got them on an SSD drive, you can tell them where, you can tell bitKlavier where those are by adding a search path here. I've already done that. I've got a what I call my DAW work SSD drive, and I've got a bitKlavier Grand folder there. So I've added that, and I'll show you what that does for us in a moment. A couple other preferences here, hotkeys. That's if you want to, for instance, in the construction site here, be able to just use keystrokes to add preparation types. You might want to turn that off if, for instance, you're doing a lot of text typing and it's messing things up. Tooltips, you keep seeing these tooltips pop up. If that's annoying, not useful to you anymore, you can turn that off. And then here is the key preference right here, enabling direct from disk sample playback. When you check that on, it will use the direct from disk sample playback functions inside bitKlavier for whatever samples you put and load here, and also for the samples that you have for the built-in samples. It will not, however, work for sound fonts. At the moment, direct from disk does not work for sound fonts, so you can't use that. Now, before I go on, why would you want to use direct from disk sample playback? There are two main reasons. One is that it's going to use a lot less memory because it doesn't have to load things into RAM or whatever. And also, and related to that, bitKlavier will load much more quickly. So rather than having to actually move those samples, it can just identify where those are. So the load times will be much faster. So the downside is that it requires much faster storage and access, and that's why you need an SSD and Thunderbolt in order for it to properly work. Okay, so I've done all that. Now I want to actually use one of these sample libraries, and this is where we choose what sample library we're using. By default, I usually have the built-in heavy library, which is a Yamaha 9-foot Grand. Very nice. It's what we've been using all along for bitKlavier. Below that, we have all the sound fonts that I have in my sound font directory. I have quite a few. Then below that, there's a separator line. This is where all of the samples are that I've put in this sample search path. So down at the bottom here, we have all of these at all the different sample rates. So I can go ahead and load a particular image, and off it goes. You see it loads very fast. And then we can use that one. It's fun to actually download a bunch of these and try them out, see how different they sound, even though they're all exactly made the same way, just with different mic images. The piano bar is the one that's probably most similar to the built-in Yamaha set, the heavy set that we've been using. It's mics really right inside the piano that offer a player perspective. But the rest of these really have lovely colors and perspectives that can be useful in different mixing or performance contexts. So that's the whole thing. Preferences to set your paths, making your choices here. Oh, and also I will add that you can, as always, make a choice regarding using global samples. So for instance, you could have instead, you could have the global sample being your bitKlavier Grand, and then you could have, for instance, this other direct be, I don't know, a sound font that you use. So since I've chosen this one, oh, actually I messed that up. I'm going to tell this one to not be global. Instead, I want it to use the org de salon, and this one, I'm going to have it be global, and I'm going to load one of my bitKlavier Grand. So the bitKlavier Grand is using the global samples, which will apply by default to any preparation that I load, whereas this one here is going to use the org de salon because I've unchecked use global samples there. So one last thing, if you're feeling like the sample library is a little bit bassy or a little bit dark or a little bit bright, there's another tutorial about this, but remember there's always the Equalizer, which you can use to adjust the EQ on your sample library. Okay, that's it.